Anyways, enough talk and let's start drawing. Is your Photoshop running? If not, pause the video and fire it up. We'll start off learning how to create a new file, and then I'll immediately jump in to teach you guys to use hotkeys because it's really important. Hotkeys save you so much time. It helps you move a lot more efficiently with your workflow because just how I explained you with the communicating idea as fast as possible, you want to avoid any sort of hiccups or road bumps to slow your process down, right? And knowing these hotkeys will prevent them. So with that being said, let's begin. So first and foremost, creating a new file. By pressing Ctrl N, a dialog box like this will pop up, okay? But depending on the Photoshop version, you might see something like this if you have a newer version. And these are the previous file size that I have previously worked on. But if this, pretty much the same thing, right? You see the untitled, the document size, and the width, the height, stuff like that. But first things first, we want to name whatever file that we're gonna start with, just whatever you want, right? So I will just call this maybe demo. And then as for the pixel size, typically 1920 by 1080 is fine. That's like a good landscape, sort of like a painting ratio that I like working with. If you're kind of unfamiliar with the pixel size, you can always change it to inches or centimeters or millimeters, whatever you want. But pixels I tend to work with. And as for the resolution, typically for a painter, you want to keep it in a range of 150 to 200. 72 is, a little too low in my opinion. But if you plan on creating something like a very nice quality print, I recommend maybe 300. And if you want to do a huge poster size image, maybe 600. But just be aware, guys. The higher the resolution, the more lag and crash you might get on your computer. So I will just keep this as 200. The color mode and 8-bit, this can stay as is, and same with the background. If you want maybe a black background, then that's fine, but just keep it white for now. With that being said, I just press create, and here we have this demo file on the new tab. Just because I have this file already open, it just created this new tab right here on the top area. And what's cool is that I could just move this and just kind of see this other file while working on this and move it back on. So it's kind of nice to be able to work on two files at the same time like this, right? Now, when you start up a new canvas in Photoshop, in default, the first layer you see is called this layer called background. You never, ever want to work on this background layer. So what I do immediately is once I have start a new file, I press Ctrl Shift N. And then you'll see this dialog box pop up. So just press OK. And now there you have it. You have this layer on top of this background, right? And another way to add this layer is to go to this square plus icon and just click on that. And here we have another layer. If you want to get rid of the layer, make sure you have the one that you want to delete selected and either press delete or backspace or click on this trash icon right next to the plus the adding layer. Okay, so this guy to delete it. So going back to the reason why you never want to draw on the background. So let me show you the example on the layer where you want to draw. I'm going to draw a smiley face, right? And on the layer, which is the background, where I do not want to draw, I'm going to draw a frowny face like this, okay? So with the happy face, if I want to move it, look at that. I could just move it wherever I want. But with the frowny face, look at that. I can't move it. It's just completely stuck. I don't know what to do with it. And let's do something else now, okay? On top of this happy face, I'm going to add a layer. And I am going to just give it some, I don't know, yellow color to color it. And boom, I colored it. But obviously, the color just completely got rid of my happy face. But no worries. I have my happy face layer right here. I'm just going to grab it and drag it up. And boom. There you have it. You have the color layer, which I can move, and the happy face layer, which I can move. Now, let's try coloring the frowny face. Okay, so I'm going to add a layer again. So that's layer 3, and I'm going to give it a blue color. And I colored it. All right, shoot. It completely got rid of the line work, but it shouldn't be a problem, right? Because I could just drag it down. So let's try that. I'm going to drag this blue down, but what the heck? I can't. I can't bring this blue down. Let's try bringing this background up. I can't do it. So yeah, that is the problem. I can move this blue, but I can't move this background. Whereas the happy face, I could move the color, and I could also move the line work, right? So as you can see, the background is locked and always stays as a background. You can hide it by pressing this eye icon right here, but by doing so, you get these checker backgrounds now. This checker background means that there is absolutely nothing in the background. It's complete blank space. And it's good to work with when you're creating something like a 2D sprite sheet or a sticker with no background if you want to print it out, because otherwise it's going to inherit this white background, right? But as a painter, to make it easier on yourself, just avoid drawing things on the background layer and always start off with a new layer to draw, to be able to like move stuff like this. Just to go over it again, to make a new layer, I just press Control, Shift, and N, and you'll get this dialog box. So just press OK, and you have a new layer, right? Or another way to make a layer, the new layers are to press this plus icon, and you'll get more layers like that, right? But you might have noticed that sometimes when you have a bunch of layers like this, in default, they'll have their own numbered name to it, but it gets confusing when there's too many of them. To show you the example, let's say that on this layer, I'm going to draw a circle, and I'm just going to randomly choose this layer. I'm going to choose square, and randomly going to choose this layer, and I'm going to draw a triangle, right? Let's see, shoot, I forgot where the circle layer is, because you can't really tell on this layer like what is what, right? The only way for me to find out is, let's say that I turn on the eyeball, and okay, so this is a square. This is layer 5 a square. The layer 6 is a circle. Layer 4 is a square, and layer 2 is a triangle. So that could get pretty annoying, right? So one way to keep your life easy and to make things easier to understand is to rename these layers. So we know that layer 6 is a circle, so just go to layer 6 and double click the name, and you'll see the layer 6 highlighter, right? And this means that I could just name it circle, and once you're done, press enter. So we have a circle layer. This is square, so I'm going to double click the layer 4 and call it square, and press enter. And I think layer 2 was triangle, so double click again, triangle, and press, oops, spell triangle, enter, and there you have it. So we have these layers a little more organized and easy to understand. We know which one is which, right? Just be careful though. Sometimes what I accidentally do is I try to rename it, but accidentally double click the outside of the name, right? And you're gonna get this dialog box, which is pretty handy, but it's something that I'd rather not cover at the moment, okay? Sometimes in a professional working environment, you occasionally will encounter a moment where you're sharing and working on the same Photoshop file with, another artist or marketing or something like that, right? And if you have like millions of layers and all scattered around with no names, it's going to be a nightmare for the other users. So, to save the headache, it's just a nice way of habit to build early on by naming each of these layers and keeping things organized, okay? If you want to duplicate, let's say this circle, one way of doing it is to press Ctrl J. And that created this new layer that says circle copy, right? And you can tell that it's a duplicate, but if I press Ctrl T and move it to the right, surely we have another circle. Another way of duplicating it is if I were to click and drag this down to the adding layer icon right here, that creates another duplicate as well. So if I press Ctrl T again and move it up, as you can see, now I have 3 circles, right? And sometimes having a bunch of these layers can be pretty overwhelming, even with proper names like this, right?
So what you can do is I would select this top layer and hold shift and press this bottom layer. And as you can see, it pretty much highlights all the layer, right? So if I press Control G or drag this into this folder icon, boom. It basically groups all the layer into one folder. So I can just hide the eyeball and it just pretty much hides everything. And if I wanted to open up the folder and see all these layers again, if I just press this arrow icon right there, you see all these files just kind of pop up. Not the file, but the layers. So you could see it. But it just keeps it organized by closing it like that, right? So that's one way of doing it. And if I want to get rid of just the group only, I could just press delete and you'll see this option. So if I delete group and content, that means it's going to delete everything. If I just want to delete the group only, that just deletes the folder. So I'm just back to my original, just the layers, right? And another way, if I want to, let's say, group only the shapes, right? What I can do is hold Control and just select the ones that I want to put into the folder. So there you have it. And now I'm going to press Control G and boom, that just grouped just the shapes, okay? But just be aware that when you do group the object or layers in a different order, everything is going to shoot all the way up to above the layer. So if you had a certain layer organized in a certain way, that's going to get messed up because everything's going to go to the top layer. So just kind of be aware of that, okay? And let's say if I want to hold Shift G and group it, and let's say if I'm happy with this and I don't need this group anymore, okay? If I press Control E, that basically flattens everything and it's not a group anymore. It becomes a whole layer, okay? Whatever you created into one. So now you don't have all those multiple layers, but you pretty much have this whole entire shape and whatever layers you drew into just this one layer, okay? But I'm just gonna go back and just keep it the same group like that. There you have it. And we've talked about deleting already, but just go over it. So if you press this trash can icon with the layer selected, that deletes the layer, or you could just press the delete key on the keyboard or backspace, right? Or another way is to right click on the layer and you get this pop-up of all these options, right? So this way you could delete the layer too, and you could also duplicate it or group the layer too. So there's all these like other options, and another cool way, you could also color code your layer too. So let's say if I want to add red, boom. So it just color coded this layer to red. It doesn't do anything to the actual drawing itself, but within the layer, it's just easier to read, right? I'm going to color code this to green, and maybe I'm going to color code this to blue. So I know which circle is which, just to keep your layers organized and for easy read. And of course, here is a very important manipulation with transparency of layer. As in default, when you create a layer in Photoshop, it will set the opacity at 100%. But watch when I click this arrow right here and drag this gauge down. So yeah, you see how it's becoming transparent? Pretty cool, huh? So let me try to this layer now. So as you can see, 100%, I could drag it down, or one more way I could do is I could just press 50% and boom. So yeah, basically when it's 0%, that's completely invisible, and when it's 100%, that's completely opaque, okay? You know, anything in between becomes transparent, and as you can see, the overlapping of this two circles are a bit darker, right? Because these two transparent circles are on top of each other. But again, you know, this layer opacity is going to be crucial with our workflow, so make sure to keep this in mind. And one more thing, let's see, we've covered the layer visibility, you know, how if we press this icon, this eye icon, it just basically shows or hides the layer, right? I think that's pretty much it. One more thing, just again, remember never to draw on the background, okay? Always make a new layer and work on the layer instead. Now that we've got the layer part all sorted out, let's have fun with brushes. But before jumping into it, let's go over some basic navigation stuff, okay? First, if I want to zoom into this image, if I press Control plus, that will basically zoom in. To zoom out, if I press Control minus, that will zoom out, okay? But let's say if I want to fit this canvas onto the whole screen. To do that, if I press Control 0, that is one way of doing it, okay? Another way of doing it, is to, here, let me just show you again. If I press this hand icon, double tap this hand icon, that will also fit the screen too. And you just might have seen me use it, but if I use this magnifying glass right here, or Z for hotkey, I have this magnifying glass, right? And let's say if I want to home into this section, I could just click and just zoom into this area. Or if I want to zoom out, if I hold Alt, as you can see, the plus becomes negative. So now I could zoom out, okay? Another way of doing it is if I just click and drag to this area, that can zoom out or zoom into this area too. And again, if I hold Alt, that will zoom out, or double click this hand icon to fit this canvas. One cool tool I like to use with this magnifying glass is to have this scrubby zoom turned on, okay? So when I have this on, basically what I can do is if I click and drag, that will just zoom in kind of freeformly, okay? And if I click and drag up, that will zoom out. So this is kind of like a really cool and fast way to really like zoom in and home into like a certain section where you want to work on. So that's sort of my little artist tip. When I have this zoom tool selected, make sure to have this scrubby zoom turned on, okay? And also one more thing, let's say when you're zoomed in really close and you want to just kind of pan around this canvas, right? If you hold space, you'll see the icon change to hands, so I could just start moving my ways around this canvas. So that's really cool way. If you kind of zoom out, then you see the entire canvas, so you can't really pan it anywhere. But as long as if you're zoomed in close enough, this is where you could pretty much pan anywhere you want. So yeah, really cool. So also the pan tool, if you just press this hand icon, that's how you can pan as well, okay? But I'll just double click that to fit the canvas. So that should be all the navigation info. So let's get moving with the brushes.